And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Corey, and I am with Vroman's Bookstore. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hosting TJ Newman in discussion with Lou Berney, and they're discussing Falling, debut novel from TJ. So excited. Before we get going, for those of you who have not yet purchased the book, there should be a green button right below the screen or under us that says purchase book. You can push that button at any time during the discussion to purchase your book. And in the comment area, please ask to have it be signed and or if you want a personalization. So put that in your comment area after you in the purchase book area when you push that button. Also tonight there is room for Q&A. So there's also a ask a question button on the right hand side of your screen. So you can put your questions there. And if you don't see the question button, then just go ahead and put it in the comment area and we'll find you. So let's get started. Our guests are TJ Newman, Lou Berney. TJ Newman is a former bookseller turned flight attendant. She worked for Virgin America and Alaska Airlines from 2011 to 2021. She wrote much of Falling on cross-country red-eye flights with her passengers while they were asleep. I kind of caught something somewhere online that started on a cocktail napkin. Is that true?
That is cool. True. Yep.
Currently, TJ lives in Phoenix, Arizona, in that nice warm weather. Falling is her first novel. Lou Berney is the author of November Road. It's the winner of the Dagger, the Hamlet, the Anthony, the Barry, the Lefty, and the McCavity Award. And it was also in the Washington Post Best Book of 2018. And The Long and Far Away Gone was also the winner of the Edgar, the Anthony, the Barry, the McCavity, and the ALA Awards. He also wrote Whiplash River and Gut Shot Straight from William Morrow. He's also written a collection of short stories, The Road to Bobby Joe, and his first fiction has appeared in publications such as The New Yorker, Plowshares, and the Pushcart Prize the Pushcart Prize Anthology. Sorry guys, full mouthful. He's also a teacher of the MFA program at Oklahoma City University. For the book of the hour, Falling, will take you on board a plane headed for New York City, where there are 143 other passengers on board with you. What you don't know is that 30 minutes before boarding, the pilot's family was kidnapped. Ooh. For his family to live, everyone on your plane must die. The only way the pilot's family will survive is if he follows his orders and crashes the plane. So enjoy the flight read. You'll be on the edge of your seat until the last page. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
Thanks so much, and TJ, thanks for doing this, and it's so great to have you here. So on the one hand, I really loved Falling. Like, it's just one of the best thrillers I've read in years. And on the other hand, you've made me never want to fly again. So like, I have mixed feelings about what you've done to me. So like, talk about maybe a little bit about, like, I'm really curious, like, how you started writing this, how this idea came from, where did it come from, and how did you start that whole story?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for doing this with me. This is really, really exciting to be talking with you. I'm a big fan, very big fan of your work. So this is very exciting. So thank you. And I'm also sorry about that flying thing. I feel like I keep getting comments of like, I couldn't sleep, I'm not flying. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's also kind of music to my ears as a writer. I feel that I'm actually glad to hear that. So sorry, but yay. Yeah. So the idea for this book came to me while I was at work. As she said, I was a flight attendant before this for 10 years. And I wrote a lot of this book on the plane. And the way I was able to do that was I worked a lot of red eyes. And once the passengers would go to sleep, I would get to work. And the idea for this book, the concept of this book came to me also on a red eye. The flight was from Los Angeles to New York, which is the flight path in the story. And I was standing at the front of the plane blocking, which if you've read the book, you know, it's like a security procedure that we do. So I'm blocking for the pilots as they're coming in and out for their bathroom break. And I'm looking, you know, down the plane at the passengers who are all asleep. It's dark, it's cold, it's quiet. And I have this thought that their lives, my life, and my crewmates' lives, all of our lives are in the hands of the pilots. And it was the first time that I'd had the thought that with that much power and responsibility, how vulnerable does that make them? And I just couldn't shake the thought. And so a couple days later, it had solidified into more of a concept, like a concrete concept. And I was flying a different trip with a different set of pilots. And one day I just kind of threw out to the captain that I was with, hey, what would you do if, I don't know, your family was kidnapped and you were told that if you didn't crash the plane, they would be killed? What would you do? And by the look on his face, I knew he didn't have an answer. And I knew that terrified him. And I knew I had the makings of my first book.
Yeah, I love that. I love that description of how like it was something that just stuck with you and you couldn't get rid of that idea. And one of the things that's so great about the book too is that you cover kind of a wide range of characters. Like it's not just the captain of the plane, it's his wife, and it's the head flight attendant, and it's another flight attendant, and it's an FBI agent. And it seems like from the very beginning you came at this in a way of seeing the big picture. Like you're not just thinking about like one perspective, but a lot of different kind of ways into this story.
I think that was a natural byproduct of the role that I've had as a flight attendant, that I've always seen a flight from an ensemble perspective. That yes, the pilot is flying the plane, but I've always been in the back of the aircraft. And I think what a lot of people don't think about is once that door shuts, we're on our own. It's just us. It's the flight attendants and the passengers, and that's it. So I think I've always understood sort of this bigger picture to the story that is just any flight. So I think that it was a natural byproduct when I started writing this, that it wasn't just going to be focusing on our hero, Captain Hoffman, but more the ensemble that comes together to you know, try to make this work.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that really sets the book apart and like elevates it above even other really good thrillers, is that kind of ensemble nature. And just the idea that like as a writer you can pull that off. Like that was one of the things that I really admired, was that like you have this ensemble of characters, but you never lose the momentum ever. Like each character has a really like exciting, you know, journey page to page. Like you never sort of hit a character and think like, oh, I want to skip this. You're like, I want to know what happens in each of these individual stories. So I'm kind of curious, just as a fellow writer, like, did you sort of plot it out all at once, or did you stick with one character for a while and then go back to another one? How did you kind of do that?
I sort of accidentally did what you just described. We'll say I didn't plot at all, which I've now learned through a fairly hefty revision and editing process that may not be the smartest way to go about writing a plot-centered book, to not plot or have any roadmap or blueprint at all. Definitely figured that out once I had gotten through the 30-some drafts that it took me to get to this finished product. But the very first draft that I wrote of this book, I wrote from different perspectives, like singular perspectives multiple times. So the first time I went through the story, I did like beginning, middle, and end from the perspective of the cockpit, from the pilots. And it went through that. And then when it was done, I went back to the beginning, like a whole new section, and went back to the beginning, this time from the back of the aircraft, from the flight attendants, beginning, middle, and end. And when we heard their story, it filled in a little bit more of what, you know, we had missed in the first telling of the story. Then I went back and did like a whole other viewpoint. And finally, once I had worked my way through all the different POVs, then you had a complete story. And I gave that first draft to a dear friend of mine who's also a writer, and he gave me invaluable feedback, which was that, look, it works, but it would work so much better if you took all these separate like threads and if you braided them together. And he went like that with his hands. And when I saw that visual, for whatever reason, it just like clicked in my head. So I think it was an accidental thing that the different perspectives maybe were fleshed out as they are, because I think I wrote the story only from their perspective in the get-go before I went back and made it all work together.
Yeah, that seems like a really smart approach. I mean, like, I'm sure it was time consuming, but again, it like the result speaks for itself. And so clearly there was something going on from the beginning that really made sense with that sort of approach. Like, you also, like, you're a bookseller for many years, and so obviously a big reader. So there's the accidental stuff is maybe also drawing on something that's sort of deep down. You want, like, I mean, how much did the book selling job sort of factor in once you started the writing process?
Big time. Like you said, I think readers, I mean, you got to read if you're going to write. And I've always been a lifelong reader. And when I was at the bookstore, that is when my sort of dream of being a writer started to become a concrete goal. Once I was surrounded by people who loved the written word and wanted to talk about the written word and tell stories and be in that world, that's when I really felt like these are people this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be surrounded with. And also booksellers know books better than anyone. So when I was writing early drafts of this, I actually got several of my fellow former booksellers together and said, would you be willing to read my manuscript and then come over to my house? I'll cook and we'll have wine and maybe you can give me some feedback. So we had this really incredible night where we all sat at my kitchen table and had, manuscripts out, and they gave me, it was like this, one night writers group that, intensive feedback session that was just invaluable to the finished product.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. I think that's a great idea. I mean, like, booksellers do know better than anybody, like, who reads and why they read and why they put a book down and why they pick it up. And so, like, what an amazing resource to have with that. Because, and again, it shows in the book, like, it's clearly something that, you can't put down. So you were talking about the 30 some drafts you did, and I know you had a little bit of a up and down in terms of getting the book sort of agented and published. Like, we'll talk about that a little bit, that roller coaster.
I'm not so sure there was a up and down. It was more down, 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 and maybe at the very last second, just through the roof up.
So how did that go? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of aspiring writers out there. They don't want to hear the path you were on.
Yeah, if anybody out there is working through their own query list right now and submitting your stuff to agents, know that I went through 41 agents who all told me no before I hit my one and only yes. So keep going and keep at it, because yeah, it's hard and it's long, and I definitely felt every single one of those 41 rejections, and there were plenty of times that I came very, very close to throwing in the towel. Very close to throwing in the towel. I just kept telling myself, though, that I didn't come this far just to come this far. And I knew that I would always regret it if I didn't give it everything, if I didn't leave everything on the field. I would always, I'd be 80 years old and looking at the manuscript in the drawer and be like, I I really think that could have been something. So I didn't want a if only situation.
Yeah, that's great. And also now you have the great pleasure of writing to each of those 41 agents and saying, I told you so. You're not going to do that. You're not. Oh, come on.
Not at all. Not at all. And I look back to the manuscript and I'm like, there were flaws, and I don't know how I got so lucky to get an agent, my agent Shane Salerno, who somehow saw through the flaws to what I was trying to do, and then helped me figure out how I could do it. When I was writing the what turned out to be like the final draft of this book, I was using the very first draft and my original notes of research as, you know, my material that I was referencing. And it was really, really nice to see that the story never changed. The story never changed. He just helped me figure out how I could tell it the way I always wanted to, but didn't know how to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like after 30 drafts, you're going back to that original one, and it's still the bedrock of everything. That's really cool. I actually was going to ask that question next. Was like, what were there any massive changes that you made over the course of the process? Clearly, the core idea stayed the same, but like, were there any kind of big changes that you made over the course that won't spoil anything, obviously, but like that you felt like, oh, okay, this was something that really put me over the line?
I think the biggest changes happened from draft 1 to 2. That was after I got this note, because then I took the entire book and broke it down basically beat by beat as to what happened, and from each viewpoint. And then I cut up the pieces and I taped them to my door and moved them around until, like a puzzle, until they fit and made sense. And I actually did that several times, taped to my door, on my coffee table. I did that multiple times. Again, this is the whole, like, if it's a plot-centered book, you should probably have an idea what you're doing ahead of time, or else you're going to be making puzzles on your coffee table. But that was one of the biggest changes that I made, was sort of trying to get it all into shape. And there were entire plot storylines that were removed, characters that, you know, were huge for, you know, the first 6 or 8 drafts. And then I just decided, sorry, your entire story is just gone. And you know, that I think the biggest change near the end was the ground line, the ground storyline of the FBI and Theo, that got really fleshed out in sort of very late in the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's like kind of what, like, the story has these two halves, really, like, in a way, and it's grounded because of what happens on the ground in a way that makes it very compelling. And again, it's like it's that rare thriller that never lets up in terms of like who you care about and what you're thinking is going to happen next. And like, it's interesting to hear that you fleshed that one out, because again, it works perfectly in balance with what's happening in the air. I mean, in terms of like, how did you, I mean, as a flight attendant, one of the things I loved about the book, by the way, was like how there's this great moment, like a small moment that mentions like how flight attendants, you know, get this a massive amount of training, and there's only like this one tiny bit that's about service. It's all about safety. It's all about taking care of the plane and the passengers. And I think that's something a lot of people don't recognize, like that flight attendants really aren't waitresses in the sky. They're there to protect and take care of, you know, this unbelievably valuable human cargo. And you get so many of those details right, but they don't ever feel like they're just details piled on details. They all sort of like work in service of the story. And the same thing with the pilot. Like there's details with the pilot that are so convincing and so authentic. You just know, like, there's no doubt whatsoever, but they never get in the way of the story. And I was wondering, like, did you have any trouble balancing? You have this vast amount of knowledge about the job and about the environment. Did you ever have to sort of pull back and say, I can't do too much, or I got to do just the right amount? Because it's just the right amount. Spoiler alert, I thought.
Well, thank you for that. And I've never actually thought about that, to tell you the truth. I think, you know, I think it's probably because I did that job for so long, for a decade. And so day in, day out, you know, aviation is such like a nuanced and very specific and task oriented. There's a million different like tasks that you do as a pilot and as a flight attendant. But after doing them every single day, practically for a decade, they become very routine. And I guess that's how it came off in the writing. I've never gotten that feedback, but it must have been something that, you know, just naturally it's like, well, yeah, that's how we set up the cart. That's how we, you know, do a door closing procedure and how we do this. It was just like, it was a throwaway moment for me as a flight attendant. So maybe that made it easier to make it strip down to the bare bones of just sort of like, yeah, this is what we do, because it's just a basic, you know, standard operating procedure type activity for us.
Yeah, that's how it comes off, and it comes out like, again, you're in character's point of view where that's what their authentic experience is. So it makes perfect sense in that context. You didn't write from the point of view of a passenger, which I thought was really cool. I thought that was a brilliant idea. Like it's everybody but a passenger. Did that ever occur? Was that one of the storylines you cut?
You know, it's kind of funny. I didn't do that on purpose, but that was feedback that I kind of got in some of the early people who had read drafts of it. And it's funny because I had several pilots and flight attendants who read and gave me feedback, and none of them gave me that perspective, and it was lost on me. And then I had, like I said, like my bookseller friends and other people who are not in aviation who were saying, we never get into the POV of the passenger. Like we don't really dig in deep there. And I think that's such an interesting tell almost of the reader that as most readers are not pilots and flight attendants, you're passengers, but everybody's been on a plane, you know? So that's the character in which the average reader can sink a little bit more comfortably into. So yeah, with this story, I didn't go deep into that perspective, which wasn't on purpose. It just sort of was the byproduct of telling the story.
It really works because, I mean, the thing about flying and why I'll never do it again, by the way, is like you're in this, you know, thin metal tube, 30,000 feet in the air, and you have zero control as a passenger. And that's the effect of reading your book. It's like you're the passenger, like you don't have control over this situation. And so I think in some ways it makes it even more of a thrilling thriller, because the reader takes that point of view. Like I'm in row 14, you know, 14D, and there's nothing I can do except sort of hope for the best. And I thought that worked really well that way. So
thank you. And I think it's an interesting perspective too, that you hit the nail on the head. Like people, you always say I'm afraid of flying, but I think a lot of people don't understand. It's like, no, you're afraid of a loss of control, because it's exactly as you just said. Once you're on that plane, once the door is shut, once it's moving, you have basically signed off and just said, I surrender. That's basically how that is. And I thought it was an interesting approach in the story, an interesting viewpoint. I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, because I was so fascinated by this idea of, in that situation, the one person that does have control is the captain or the pilot. Right. And we put a man in a situation where we take his control. So now what does he do, being the person that's in control, and suddenly he's lost control? His family is, you know, on the other side of the country. He's moving farther and farther away from them. He can't, his threat is not there with him, and he doesn't know how to react in that situation. And I just thought that was a fascinating, it goes beyond just the, you know, what would you do if you were in this situation, to how would a person in that position that is being asked to do the impossible react when it is completely counter to all of his training and conditioning.
Yeah, and one of the things you do really well, I thought, is you set up like a series of obstacles that make it impossible. Like it's not, you know, it's a great premise for your novel, but it's so much more than the premise, because once that first thing hits, the dominoes start going down, and everything the captain thinks of, or everything the head flight attendant thinks of, or the FBI thinks of, you've thought ahead and put up another obstacle in front of that. So it's sort of like they keep getting trapped and trapped and trapped, and that's sort of what drives the momentum in a really effective way, I thought. So it's like it's out of control, but it stays out of control and it gets worse and worse and worse, which is makes it like a really fun read. So what, I guess we should, I know someone's going to ask this question, but like, and I apologize. You get this question so much, but you got to tell us some horror stories from your flight attendant days.
I mean, you get everything. You get everything from the benign and, well, not benign, but, you know, from the time I was flying, one of my first flights, by the way, out of training, literally like maybe my first trip, second day of my first trip. And we were flying San Francisco to Vegas on a Friday, around this time on Friday, which if you've ever worked that flight, it is, people are going to party. It is a weekend crowd. They're going to Vegas. And they've pre-partied at the airport. They get on the plane, every single seat was filled. They were ready to rock and roll. I'm brand new and I'm thinking like, this is a super quick flight. I know we're going to have turbulence going into Vegas because it's the summertime and you got that hot air. So we got to get service done really fast. I'm nervous. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And a call light goes off immediately after we take off. Like we're like, wheels have barely left the ground and a call light's going off. And I go out there and a man has projectile vomited everywhere, on him, on all of the seats, on the other passengers, on the aisle. There is vomit everywhere. So now I've got to try to get the biohazard kit and scrape up all of this sickness and try while getting the cart out there. And I'm brand new. It was a very humbling reminder that this whole glamorous flight attendant life that everybody talks about, you know, when on like day 2 of the job, you're scraping up, you know, vomit. It's a nice reminder of like, gear up. You're going to have some stories. This is not going to be all fun layovers and wonderful cities.
Oh man, that's the worst. That's good.
Yeah.
Was that a writer? That was probably a writer who threw up, right? It was probably, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with so I guess I'm kind of curious. Like, you're on the middle of a bookstore right now, and it's your debut book. It's a big book. It's just blowing up like crazy. I saw that you were at Costco today with giant pallets of your book, which is pretty awesome, right? Like, how does it feel? Like, is it kind of like a little surreal, or is it just something like, yeah, I was meant for this?
It's not a little surreal. It's a lot of surreal. I mean, it's just, I was talking to a friend today and I said, I think once this kind of like calms down a little bit, and this is not quite the fever pitch of the week of publication, which, you know, is just like a fever pitch. I think I'm going to look back and just go, what just happened? It's the most surreal, like every time I walk into a bookstore and can walk up and see a book that I wrote and see like a customer pick it up to go to the register, it's surreal. It is absolutely surreal. And when I've said this before, that when I was a bookseller at Changing Hands, I used to, if I was shelving a book with an author with my last name, Newman, I would take my thumb and I would cover their first name as I was shelving it. And I would just pretend that it was my book that I was shelving. So to have my thumb no longer be necessary in that equation is just, it's been an incredible week and an incredible ride. And I'm sure it'll soak in later, but for now I'm just smiling this big nonsense. Yeah. My cheeks are genuinely sore over the last few days because all I do is smile.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. Have you seen anybody reading your book on a plane yet?
Not yet. Not yet. I did on my flight out today. I did bring my book to give to the crew, because oftentimes as a flight attendant, we fly on travel benefits, staff benefits, and so you usually bring like a bag of candy and say like, thank you so much for the ride. You know, if you need anything, I'm in this row. So today when I took my flight, I said, you know, hey, I'm a former flight attendant. If you need an ABP, which if you've read the book, that's called an able-bodied person, someone who's willing to assist in the event of, you know, a medical or some sort of emergency. So I said, you know, I'm a former flight attendant. If you need anything, I'm in 27 Alpha. And also like I wrote this and I gave them copies of my book, and it was so cool to see them excited. And the pilots, actually, when they saw the book, they were like, oh, I've been wanting to read that. And that is just, it's just incredible.
That's so awesome.
So awesome.
What are you working on now? You're probably way too busy. We have the same agent, Shane Salerno, and I know when a book comes out, you're basically just shackled to like the wall, and you don't do anything but work on the book. So I know you're busy right now, but do you have another novel cooking in your head? Is it something you're thinking about?
I do. It's something, my book deal was a 2-book deal, so I have the incredible privilege of getting to do this again. So up until kind of things got really, really cooking to get towards publication, I was working on my second book every day. I've been working on it. But like you said, right now it's fairly intensive. So I've kind of left the notes and the work at home, and I'm just focusing on this because it's a lot. This is old habit for you. I mean, that list of accolades is just, I mean, you've done this a lot. This is my first time, and I'm just kind of looking around going, oh my gosh, it's a lot. It's incredible.
It never gets old. I mean, there's no feeling, like you said, with seeing your name on a book is just the most awesome thing ever. And know that people are reading your book, and it's great that you get this opportunity, and that we get this opportunity to do that. What else, like, what are some, like, have there been any big surprises about the process for you? Like, or whether it's in the writing or the publishing or the promoting, things that have kind of, like, you thought as a bookseller, I thought it was going to be this way, but it's actually really different. I mean, was there anything like that?
I think the main thing that's sort of been an education was, like, I knew it would be work, but it's the concept of, like, the concept that, like, you can know something, but until you go through it, you just don't understand it. And so I knew it would be a ton of work, and I had already done a ton of work for a really long time. So I was geared up and ready to go. And I think that I had no idea how much that ton of work, like, what that meant. And I now look at any book that has gone to publication, and I am just in awe that happened. Now that I fully understand what it takes to take a book, not just a manuscript, but then to get it into a finished product that is on the shelves and then into the reader's hands, it's so much work. And I just have such a deep respect for each piece along the way, from, the bookseller who's the final piece to, it's just everybody that has been a very eye-opening experience that I've been very grateful to have, that sort of broadened perspective of the people that make this happen.
It's awesome. I see we're getting a lot of questions from the audience. So maybe we should start. Did we lose TJ?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. There you are. You're back.
I'm back.
She's back. Cliffhanger. So maybe we should start answering some questions. Let's see. Okay. So Susan is asking, what do you think the discipline of writing and working in aviation have in common? So yeah, let's start with that. Yeah. What do the discipline of writing and working in aviation, if there's something in common there?
Interesting. I've never thought about that. I think both are acts of creation. And I think, which sounds weird. I've said this before. So my background is in theater, actually. I have a degree in theater. And when I started working on the plane, I would tell people all the time, like, I get a tremendous amount of creative satisfaction from this job. And when you think about it, a flight has a beginning, middle, and an end. There are people literally in costumes. People literally have lines to say. There is almost always some sort of inciting conflict and drama. And you have a set period of time in which you can resolve this conflict. So, and while aviation within that framework is very methodical and has absolute protocols and steps that are followed every single day, in between each of those steps, it's nothing but improvisation. Mm-hmm. It's nothing but improvisation. And so I think that there's quite a bit of storytelling and improv to aviation, which obviously, pairs perfectly with writing. And I think that, you asked the discipline of writing and working in aviation. And I think that discipline word is key, because both of them also are jobs or positions where you have to write, you have to do these things. And it doesn't matter if you're tired, it doesn't matter if you're there. There is a certain amount of discipline to, this is the task and I have to keep going forward. So I think that working flights and being exhausted after not sleeping well and jet lagged, and we came in late because we were delayed, and we have an early van, and now we've got another delay in this, but still having to go through it is very similar to the discipline of writing. At least maybe, Lou, it's easy for you, but for me, it's like a lot of the time it's like, you know, you're sitting in front of your keyboard like, what now? And I think that the discipline is just sitting there and not letting yourself get up until you figured out what the what now is.
Yeah, totally. The discipline thing is, I mean, it's oftentimes horrible to write, and you just have to sort of like a flight can be horrible. Like you can have a guy projectile vomiting, and you still got to put on the hazmat and clean it up. Like that's your job. And so hopefully that doesn't happen too often in the writing process, equivalent of that. But yeah, the discipline thing is a great insight.
If it happens a lot in the writing process, I'm going to need to see a doctor. So
right. Okay, here's another question. Chris, TJ, before you landed your agent, were you at all paranoid about sharing your premise with others? Any concerns about your idea ending up on the internet, or worse, stolen by another creator?
I actually didn't tell hardly anyone about this project at all. Not out of a fear that it would be stolen, but out of a fear of putting myself out there artistically. My background, like I just said, was I have a degree in musical theater. I moved to New York. I pursued my dreams on Broadway and failed miserably. Just really, really, really got my corners knocked off in New York. And I left and moved back home to Phoenix and moved in with my parents. And now I'm doing the mid-20s. What do I do with my life? I'm living in my childhood bedroom again, and I don't know what to do, which is so much fun. And that's when I got the job at Changing Hands. And that's when sort of the next steps started falling into place. And I realized at Changing Hands that I could still be creative and still scratch that creative itch, because I'm a creative person. It's never going to go away, but at least I didn't have to do it as publicly as theater is. So writing, getting back to my writing roots helped me be creative in a far more introverted, private way. And when I had the concept for this book hit me, and I knew that it was something that I would see all the way to the end of the story, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to put myself out there to fail again. And that stayed pretty much through the entire process. When I had, when the news went public that I had gotten a book deal, I had so many like close friends and family who would be texting me or calling me and saying, "Oh my God, congratulations. This is incredible. You wrote a book?" Like nobody knew that I was doing this. It was, I played it close to the chest the whole time.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, I think it's smart in a lot of ways. And it's interesting you talk about moving home after the New York experience, and it kind of reflects in your characters. And one of the things I really love about Falling is that none of the characters are superheroes. You know, they're not like the kind of, they all have vulnerabilities. They're all like have doubt and weaknesses and strengths. And they're not the kind of characters who are just going to like, you know, they're going to win in the end, and they're going to like, you know, kick 100 asses and save the day. And I think, you know, like there might be some sort of like rhyme between your own experiences and characters who are human in a thriller that could very easily not be populated with human characters, but really is.
I love that. Thank you. And that actually makes me think of something that I've actually never thought about, is that when I was a flight attendant and I worked primarily in first class, I had a lot of celebrities all the time. Because I went LA, New York. That's just like pretty much what I always did. And so we had a lot of celebrities on my airline. And I think it was interesting to see, like, you know, I had several Marvel superheroes who, you know, I'm a big MCU fan. So it's like, oh my God, I have so-and-so on the plane. And then, you know, you realize sort of as the flight goes on, it's like, huh, they're human. They're just like a person. And it was, I think it was, you know, I've said before also that the flight attendant is like getting paid to people watch. And so I'm people watching just, you know, Joe Nobody sitting next to, you know, Marvel superhero X, and seeing like, I guess we're all just kind of people. And so maybe that sort of came off in the writing. I've never thought about that.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, questions. Let's see. Okay, this is from Brian. I loved in all caps, just so you know. I loved this book so much. I know the movie rights were picked up by Universal, speaking of celebrities. Are you in your head casting people for these characters you created? And then also, who is the best celebrity you've had on a flight?
Ooh.
2 questions.
Ooh, for the casting of the characters of the movie, I've already fully cast it with the completely fictitious characters that I had in my mind when I was writing the book. I would have never dreamed. My only goal was to get this book somehow published. So the thought of a movie deal, it never even occurred to me. So like to place these people in like real life in that kind of context the fact that the rights were bought, I mean, is just, it is so far beyond what I thought would ever happen that no, I didn't cast it. And now it's honestly kind of hard. It's like, I don't know, getting rid of your children and getting new ones if I tried to cast it. So I really don't have any, you know, movie cast that I thought. And my favorite celebrity, the best celebrity that I have, that's, you know who stuck out was LeVar Burton. I had him on a flight in the I actually had him multiple times on a flight. And he sat in the emergency exit row, and he was more attentive than anyone I've ever had. Like he was like piercing with his eyes and like paying attention to the briefing. And I knew that if something went wrong, I could count on LeVar Burton. He would be there to help. So that was a pretty big standout moment.
That's awesome. What about the worst celebrity? And you can go ahead and name names. I think we all want to hear this.
No, a flight attendant never spills the dish like that. At least not to the passengers. We definitely, as flight attendants, we definitely have like our list of like, everybody knows the notorious celebrities that are great and the notorious celebrities that are not so great. So yeah, I did have one celebrity that was, who shall not be named, just strange. He played his guitar the whole flight, but like didn't pluck the strings, so there was no noise. He just kind of like pretended like he was, and then he wrote a note to try to like be flirtatious with one of the flight attendants, but he wrote it backwards, like the way that Leonardo da Vinci used to write, where you'd have to hold it up to a mirror to read. It was just the strangest. And it was a transcon, so it was a long flight, and we were just kind of like, huh, not what I expected from the movies. This is an experience.
That's hilarious. That's great.
Yeah.
Valerie wants to know, how did you choose your character names, the names for the characters?
Some of them just came. Joe is my favorite name for a girl. I love androgynous names in general, and so Joe just kind of popped out. Joe's one of my favorite names to have a girl. How did I name the rest of them? I don't know. I sort of thought about what fit for that character. Like Kelly, she's like a young flight attendant, so the name Kelly just seemed right, and spelled with an IE is, younger than the more traditional Kelly. So yeah, I don't know. And like Bill, he is a pilot. Pilots have, it's a stereotype, but it's absolutely accurate that pilots' names are like monosyllabic. Bill, Bob, Ted, Al, John, like that's all pilot names are something like that. So that was a natural thing that Bill's name was just as vanilla pilot as it gets.
Yeah, like no nonsense, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, let's see another one. This is from Billy. I thought your choice of antagonist was interesting. Did you consider other quote unquote villains, or was this your choice from the beginning?
I definitely like all the character storylines. The only characters actually that stayed like 100% true to what they were from the whole time were the flight attendants. They came to my mind exactly as they were, and they never once wavered from the first draft to the final draft. They were just themselves. But the antagonist storyline, and I can't say too much without giving away too much of the book, but I wanted to have that storyline rooted in empathy and looking at the question of why would someone do something this terrible. So that was kind of the driving motivation of why I went toward the direction that I did.
Yeah, that's a good answer without spoiling anything. So that was excellent. Yeah. I think I'm being told we have one more question, time for one more question, which is, this is from Sarah, would love to hear about your current writing rhythms and what and who inspires you.
So my night owl tendencies for working red eyes definitely carried over into my writing life. If I have my perfect writing day, I'm up till 4 a.m. and then sleeping till noon or 1 p.m. I like it being dark. I don't like writing when it's light out for some reason, and I prefer to write when it's cold too, which doesn't really work very well when I live in Arizona. So yeah, middle of the night is sort of my perfect writing time. I pour a cup of coffee around 9 or 10 and get to work, or that's the pick me up after I've started writing before that. But and for who inspires me, originally, like, my foundation of writing is, in those 90s blockbuster thrillers. I'm a child of the 90s, and that's what I loved. Michael Crichton, John Grisham, in the movies, your Twisters, your Air Force One, your Jurassic Park. Like, I love those stories that just grab you and just won't let you go. And so that was sort of like my foundation. And then sort of as it progresses, I have to say, Lou, you've been a big inspiration to me. November Road is a masterpiece. It is absolutely a fantastic piece of fiction. And it's like the pinnacle of like how to tell a page-turning, thrilling story with just class. That's how I felt like when I read your book. I was like, this is classy. It's just, and I also have to tell you, I was going through my phone looking for an old picture, and I was like way back in the timeline. This was just happened recently, and I was like way back in the timeline, and I was like, wait, what? And I scrolled back, and I had taken in 2018. Is that when November Road came out? Yeah. I had taken a screenshot of the cover of your book with the blurb on like a Bookstagram account, like on Instagram.
Wow.
And I screenshot things as like a note to self, reminder to check out later, because I saw that and I was like, oh, screenshot, like this one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was funny because that was, we share an agent, Shane Salerno, but that was way before any of that had happened. So there was no connection. It's just wild how everything just comes full circle in a cool way.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, well, thank you very much. And the check is in the mail for that shout out. I appreciate that very much. I think we're getting joined back by are you there? Yeah, there she is.
Yeah. Hey guys, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to pop back in and just let you guys know that we're about to wrap up here. Thank you so much for doing this, for talking about your book, and Lou for being here, for all your questions. They were very good, and I'm really excited, TJ, for you. This is really awesome. I'm so happy that your first book, wow, you're getting a movie deal and everything. It's just so cool.
And it's so nice to see. It's so well deserved too. It's always so nice to see a debut writer hit it big, but when it's deserved so much, it's even sweeter. So like, it's really great to see this happening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, just to let the audience know, we are going to wrap up. If you want to purchase books, you can do so with that little blue button right now on the bottom of our screen. In the comment area, please write if you want to have a signed book. Also, TJ is willing to do personalizations, so please, in that comment area of where you order the book, write in that you want it signed and personalized.
Because I'm in LA today, and I'm planning on making it out to the store tomorrow to sign everything. So I would be more than happy to personalize and sign anything, especially if you were on a part of this chat. It was, yeah, thank you for doing that. So please, if you do want it personalized, I would love to.
Yeah, so everyone, you hear that? So yes, put that in the comment area when you purchase the book. And that's just great. So all right, I say it's time to wrap this up. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, TJ, for showing up. And thank you, Lou, for showing up. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night. I hope you have a good time in LA and have fun at the bookstore tomorrow.
Always do. I was based in LA for 10 years, and this is one of my homes away from home, and I love it here. And it's frankly a lot cooler than Arizona this time of the year. So I'm loving it.
Good, good. Yes, and to let everybody know that if you came in late, there is a replay of this whole conversation. So you can just wait for us to be done and it'll just replay itself, or you can go back in at any time and check Vroman's live on Crowdcast and play it at any time, or any of our past events. And we do have some really good events coming up next week if you would like to join us next week. All right. And I'm going to let you guys go and have a good night.
All right.
Thanks, TJ.
Bye.
Thank you, Lou.
Bye,
Thank you, Roman.
Congratulations.
Thank you.